Let's now have a deep look at the discursive construction of terrorism by looking into certain examples from available texts. Here I'll provide an example of the construction of discourses about terrorism by by reporting the investigation uh, of the speeches of President Bush, who was the American president at the time of 9/11, and how he manipulated that situation to create certain impacts or certain opinions about terrorism and the people who enacted terrorism on America and in other parts of the world. We'll just have a deep look how the discourses about terrorism were created by then American president after 9/11. And after 9/11, Bush created who was seen as the main leader to fight against uh, terrorism by enforcing a state of moral order through the emotionalization of facts. Analysis of Bush speeches reveal that he used all kinds of lexico, semantic, or pragmatic tools to build a reality in favor of administration's socio-political agenda. He showed and this displayed a clearly hegemonic discourse that attempted to shape public understanding of terrorist violence. Uh, for a long period of time after 9/11, the phenomenon of terrorism was seen through the eyes of Bush administration and or any other American administration. The way they interpreted terrorism, most of rest of the world relied on it because they were the victims in in, in some serious terrorist attacks which happened on 9/11/2001. The aim of such this study was conducted by Bhatia, and the aim of this study was to explore how the discursive construction of terrorism is often a powerful tool of propaganda used to further certain socio-political goals. So it's not about war against terrorism only, rather, according to the researcher Bhatia, this war against terrorism was turned into a kind of discourse which aim to achieve other socio-political or maybe economic agendas also. The speeches of Bush can be analyzed in three specific periods according to Bhatia. First one is the pre-war period when America had gone through terrorist attacks, but they had not waged the war of revenge so far. And this lasts from September 11, 2001 to the end of the year on December 11, 2001, which may be counted exactly as 3 months after 9/11 attacks, during which Bush's rhetoric was fairly and clearly aggressive, and while and addressing to an audience who was furious and rightly so after attacks on America. He was reassuring such audience of revenge and justice. The build up to the war period, then later on, it lasts from his State of the Union address on January 29, 2001, till the end of major combat operations in Iraq on May 1, 2003. And this is fairly a lengthy period as compared to the previous one. And during this period, Bush, while talking about terrorism, always tried to create a link between terrorism and Iraqi government of that time. This continuous period generated discourses that offered a pretext of the war against Iraq and other nations whom American administration thought is sponsoring terrorism. The post-war period, which lasts from July 23, 2003 to the State of the Union address given by him on January 31, 2006. And this is considered to be the end of the war period because the major offensive military action was over and people were somehow trying to analyze the outcome of the war. And this period was largely consumed, the discourses generated during this period was largely consumed on justifying a faulty war by focusing on the attainment of democracy, let's say in Iraq. And most of us, and those among us who remember those periods would know that most of American administration's rhetoric would be about achieving freedom for for Iraqi people, or democracy for the land of America, for the land of Iraq. After 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center, Bush capitalized on the constant influx of negative feelings, uh, negative emotions, revengeful emotions among people, drawing on a morality metaphor within which evil and terrorism was personified in a personality which was highlighted during that period as enemy of the world, quite frequently in the discourses of American administration, primarily led by Bush himself. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. These are the word of Bush. I'll give examples of some other pieces from his speeches also to highlight these points. And the acts of terror, in quotation mark, these are the words of President Bush, are hyperbolically labeled as evil, implicating terrorists themselves as evil men. So, evil here opens up a range of religious and social references also, and this religious imagery relies heavily on biblical and sometimes even other religious resources also. And this brings into light the religious concepts of good and evil. Phrases such as our nation saw evil and the very worst of human nature. This shows how the issue of terrorism was highlighted as a religious phenomena, just to give it more emotional strength, emotional vigor, and just to charge up people further against this phenomena, and to give a kind of rationale to their actions or proposed actions against other nations. They are flat evil. There is no other option. They are only evil. Bush said this on 25/9/2001. Imply that rather categorical nature of either of evil, which as a type categorization denotes the kind of people that terrorists are based on their previous experiences with them. They are flat evil. This is a kind of categorization, uh, not only condemning terrorists and the people who conducted terrorism as evil, but necessary evil. They cannot be no. There can be no other option, but they should be and they would be evil only. Evil is further equated with barbarism in later speeches. For example, there is a great divide in our time between civilization and barbarism. These are the very words of Bush also, which were delivered again in December 2001. So this just further heightened the impact Bush wanted to create. Then the civilized world is rallying to America's side. We wage a war to save civilization against the forces of evil, against the forces of barbarism. We didn't seek it, but we must fight it. This shows the moral position also, that we are not the seekers of war, but since we have been pushed towards war, we'll fight it bravely. This shows a kind of typical American trope in which a reticent cowboy doesn't fight himself, rather he but when he's pushed towards it, he strikes hard. So this shows a kind of a resort not only to moral imagery but also to national imagery, but as well as to religious imagery. The discourses generated immediately after the 9/11 period represented disparate terrorist networks into a singular entity, and that entity can be unified as something which we call evil. All forces which sponsored terrorism anywhere in the world are the evil forces. A newly installed President Bush, who had not achieved any great feats, was given a chance to become a strong, commanding leader, a national hero who would be remembered for centuries. This was a kind of glorification which presumably Bush was seeking. Bush's rhetoric went on to become boldly accusatory, laying blame on the barbaric terrorists, catering to the core weakness of a distraught populace who was already emotionally charged and somehow was revengeful because their nation was attacked. Revenge was sworn, but disguised as a cosmic struggle between two polar dualities, good and evil. So the revenge of American administration on those who exacted terrorism against their country was turned into a kind of moral war. That was something which was achieved by Bush uh, during the early days after 9/11. We'll look further into the analysis of his speeches.